everybody, and welcome to our Teaching English live stream coming to you from the British Council Teaching English social media team, wider team. We've just gone live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So welcome everybody to our new theme, July to September, and our theme is called Knowing the Subject. So today we're going to delve into all the aspects of knowing the subject. And to help me do that, I have two people with me, Zainab and Fraser. Hi, Zainab.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. It's so good to have you with us. And hi,
Yeah, it's
Fraser.
lovely to be here.
Hello there.
So, Zainab, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are and what your connection is to our theme of knowing the subject?
Okay, so I'm Zainab Shibani, and I'm based in Libya. I work as an e-moderator and teacher trainer with the British Council. I'm also a moderator for the British Council Facebook pages, the British Council Courses for Teachers. I'm one of the tutors on that. And I'm also a moderator for the MENA Teaching English website, Middle East and North Africa region.
Oh, you have a lot of hats.
Yeah. Got two hats on today.
And Fraser, where are you and what's your connection to knowing the subject?
Well, Karen, I'm actually in China at the moment, in rural China, more specifically, but I'm normally based in Glasgow, so it's quite a different scene for me today.
That's very different.
Very much so. I hope the signal holds out today for us. So my role currently is managing the Teacher Educator Facebook page and generally the meta communities for global teacher education. So I'm here to talk a little bit about that, having been a teacher educator myself for some time and working with the British Council in China, surprisingly, specifically in the past. So I'm very much looking forward to talking about teacher education today.
Wonderful. Well, it's fantastic to have both of you with us to get a teacher perspective and a teacher educator perspective. I just want to say a big hello to people who are joining us. Lots of people on Instagram. We have Berta Sanova Asam from Kazakhstan. We have Shireen, I'm a teacher at Beacon House watching from Peshawar, Pakistan, and lots of other teachers joining us. Mujola from Kazakhstan. Welcome everybody on Instagram. And here on Facebook, we have, oh no, that's Marcus's comment. We have, hi Rachna, lovely to see you here. And here we have Skipe Behra. And on YouTube, no, that's Marcus's comment again. Hi to Marcus in the background who is moderating. So welcome everybody. Tell us where you're joining from. And we're now going to delve into what is knowing the subject. So Zainab, what's your understanding of knowing the subject for teachers?
Yeah, well, knowing the subject, obviously a very broad topic and a very important one as well. And I think a lot of teachers sometimes think it means understanding grammar and understanding vocabulary, but really it's a lot more than that. It's obviously, part of it is grammar and vocabulary, but then also the language skills as well, pronunciation, also a very important part. But it's also understanding how the language works, how students develop their skills, and most importantly, you can understand and know your subject, but you need to know how to teach it as well. So being able to teach the language in a way where students can understand it and then use it as well. So yes, it's definitely a very important part. And I think it involves a lot of aspects as well.
That's a fantastic summary. Well, couldn't have done it better myself. I was looking earlier at some of the information we have on our website about knowing the subject, and I think you just did a fantastic summary there, knowing about it and knowing how to teach it.
Yes.
And we also have the same theme for teacher educators. Fraser, tell us a little bit about what it means for teacher educators.
We do. The planets have aligned in terms of the themes of teacher educators. I think perhaps it's important to start off a little bit with what the difference is between teacher and teacher educator, because some people might actually ask, isn't a teacher an educator? And putting the two words together can sometimes confuse. So it just quite simply, or to put it quite simply, teacher education is looking at supporting teachers and helping teachers to develop. So if you like, it's someone that's there in a mentoring, a training, or a similar role that will support teachers. This could be a peer, or it could be someone in a training position, for example, or even in leadership. So teacher education has quite a wide focus. I think what Zainab has just said is actually quite similar in terms of what the teacher education, knowing the subject, focuses on. Although we'll be looking a little bit more deeply at these subjects, and not only the what, perhaps, but the why, the how, and the when to deliver it, when it's appropriate, for example. So looking a bit more at the subject, theory, methodology angle, and also some of the research that underpins that can support those opinions. So knowing the subject does focus on the skills, it does focus on the systems, but perhaps looking a bit deeper into how, when, and why those are used.
Fantastic. And I'm sure some of that is quite interesting for teachers too, who may be moving into teacher education, or even just for some background information for themselves.
Well, really a teacher educator is probably, or almost certainly, a teacher first. So I think it will certainly be very interesting for teachers and those currently in teacher educator roles.
Thank you so much, Fraser. We have a comment here on Facebook from Mohammed. Knowing the culture of that language and its idiomatic competence. So that's like, another aspect of knowing the subject. So Zainab, you mentioned grammar and vocabulary, but as Mohammed is talking about, like, maybe does language have a culture, or what sort of aspects of English that are a part of knowing the subject that's a bit beyond maybe the words and the grammar?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, when you're teaching the language, you are also teaching the culture. And you can see that obviously in the course books. And I've done many training courses for IELTS in the past. And, I've done it here in the Arab world, and students would tell me, yeah, but this is something that we can't relate to, or this is something that we don't understand. And I'd say, well, you're going to take this exam, you want to learn English, you have to learn the culture as well. It is definitely, you can't teach the language without involving aspects of the culture. As long as it's appropriate for the culture that you're in. But otherwise, yes, you're teaching them together.
Yes, like with what Rachna says, the situation of language within different cultural frameworks. Because one of the aspects of knowing the subject is also around varieties of Englishes and exposing learners to different types of English around the world, and the different sounds that maybe different learners make or find difficult. But wait, I just wanted to say hello to a couple of people on. Oh, there's so many comments on Instagram. We've got a teacher from Albania, Lila, and we've got. There's a quick question, just a practical question. Will participants receive a certificate of attendance? For our lives, no, but for our webinars, yes. And we'll come on to the webinars in just a moment. So maybe that's a good time to talk about what's coming up on Teaching English. So Fraser, for teacher educators, what can we look forward to about knowing the subject?
Well, some of our audience might not know that we have a new Facebook group for teacher educators, the teacher educator community. So I think this is now going to be the hub of much of the activity for us in teacher education. We have a regular post and interaction on the Facebook group, and we'd invite everyone who's interested in teacher education or is a teacher educator to join us there. There's some great discussion going on, also notification of events. And specifically in terms of events, we also have webinars, just similar to our teacher colleagues. Every month we have a webinar. It's on a Wednesday. This month coming, it's July 15. We're looking at teaching in multilingual contexts and how to support teachers who are teaching in those contexts. And in August, we have one looking at AI, which is always a hot topic.
That's always a hot topic.
And how this can support in teacher education and supporting teachers. So I think there's some great topics coming up, and that one in particular I'm very excited about. But there's ongoing discussion every week within the teacher educator community. So I'd again invite everyone to come and join us.
Fantastic. And you can find the link to the Teacher Educator Facebook community group. Marcus is tagging it in the Facebook comments. On Instagram, you can find the link in our bio, and on YouTube, it will be in the description of the recording video. So plenty of places to find it. And also keep an eye open on our social media channels for information about the group and webinars that are coming up. So Zainab, what's happening in your Middle East, North Africa region and on the courses?
For the courses, they could easily enroll in the courses on the Teaching English website, and we have a number of students who are already enrolled in many of these courses. However, we also have just a small program just for the Middle East and North Africa teachers, and it's a community of practice. We have some sessions on Zoom, and we have some sessions on WhatsApp, and we follow the theme. So the theme now, which is starting this week, is on knowing the subject, and there are different modules. So we have a number of tutors, and each tutor teaches a different module, sometimes on Zoom, sometimes on WhatsApp. But we also have a module on technology. So that's a little different. And yeah, a lot of the teachers really enjoy that because, I mean, as teachers, a lot of us are technologically challenged. So, I mean, English teachers usually. So it has been helpful, especially now with, all the things that are out there that we can use, online, and the different apps that we can use in our classroom. So a lot of the teachers find these technology sessions, and I think the technology sessions are mainly on Zoom, so that it's more practical. They can actually see what they need to do.
And for the courses?
For the courses, we have some, the courses that were for knowing the subject. We have how to teach pronunciation, how to teach listening, understanding language systems, and there's a brand new one called communicative tasks. These are all great for knowing the subject, and then we have some that are from earlier themes, such as digital competences and the refugees course. So there are a number of courses. I think there are about 10, and they're all free. And they come with a number of resources. They come with a workbook. And then obviously just having access to the Teaching English website, there's also free lesson plans and articles.
That's right.
And the lesson plans, what's great about the lesson plans is that you have for different ages, you have for different levels, and a lot of them are accompanied with the resource that you can actually use.
That's what I like about them, and I like how they get broken down on the page into like a sort of summary, so you can have a quick look, a warmer, and you go, oh yeah, okay, I think that would work for me. So thanks for the segue, Zainab, onto where can you find this information? Well, I'll show you right now. So here we have on our Teaching English website, under Professional Development for Teachers, we have a whole section on knowing the subject, which starts with, what does it mean? Subject expertise, knowing aspects of language, knowing language awareness and lexis and skills, but also knowledge of the pedagogy, as Zainab mentioned, how to teach the subject. And you can find the resources here. This is the Communicative Tasks course and Understanding Language Systems course, which is all about functional terminology. And there's webinars for teachers coming up. Our next webinars are on the 17th of June Knowing the Subject webinars. And there, Fraser, there's the Teacher Educator webinar on supporting multilingual learners. So that's where you can find the information on our website and on our social media channels. So there was a little bit of a survey done of teachers a few years ago on knowing the subject, asking teachers about what aspects they would like support in. And there were 6 areas around grammar, lexis, pronunciation, and all the skills, speaking, reading, and writing. So Zainab, for you, in your experience of working with teachers, which parts have you noticed that teachers like sort of want to have the most support with or find it difficult, so that we can provide resources to support teachers?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because I think just a few days ago, there was a post on our Amina Facebook page on what skills do you find most difficult to teach? And the 2 that stood out were phonology and writing.
Oh, interesting.
So I think
phonology and writing.
Yes. And I think with phonology is the main reason I think a lot of teachers find it difficult to teach is they feel they need to be a native speaker and to have that native accent to teach the language. And as long as it's clear, as long as your spoken English is clear, then it's fine to do phonetics with your students. It's fine to drill. It's fine to teach them how to pronounce words. You don't have to have that native accent. So I think a lot of them tend to have this idea that I'm not a native speaker, I don't have that accent, how am I supposed to teach phonology? And with writing, I think I think a lot of teachers also need support with the step-by-step process on how to teach writing. They're not sure how to do it, so they find it difficult. The students find it difficult.
I mean, I know that for me, I was doing a writing piece recently, and I just stared at the blank screen and the blank page for a really long time. That sort of having a framework or helping students to get started. So teachers watching, which areas of knowing the subject, like the English language for teaching, which do your students find hardest, or which do you find difficult to teach? And Fraser, for teacher educators, are there any areas of knowing the subject that teacher educators are sort of looking for more support with?
Well, I'd like to go back to Zainab's point there very quickly about phonology. I think it's very important because I think working with teachers, this is a common belief that they have to achieve a certain accent, a standard accent, a British accent or an American accent. But of course, on today's event, we have 2 Scots who are perhaps renowned for not having the most easy accent to understand. So what is an accent? I think that's the question, and who actually speaks with what might be called the Queen's English, I think, or the King's English, if you like. I think very few people actually speak that way. So I think comprehension really is the key. And I think trying to help teachers along, obviously helping with phonology and using phonemics, etc. This might be helpful in breaking down words and how to say them. But in terms of accent, perhaps it's not as important as we might think.
I'm also going to just pick up on the accent thing, because we've recently posted some quotes from our teacher community on accents, and they have been really popular posts. So it's something that I'm looking forward to having more conversations about accent. I mean, I think that's a great question. What is an accent? And Zainab, like you were saying, we have this sort of notion from the past that you have to speak in a certain way. And I mean, I know my accent has changed since teaching English. Like it's a little bit different. And I've slowed down considerably as well, then especially teaching beginners. Yes, so accent is something we'll be talking about quite a lot, and teaching pronunciation and phonology. Do you think teachers, and maybe even teacher educators, should use the phonetic alphabet when they are writing words on the board?
Which one?
Which one? Which one? Tell us more, Fraser.
Well, I think the common use is the IP, or the International Phonetic Alphabet, but there are different ones in North America, for example, and other places that, depending on where you're teaching, they may use a different phonemic alphabet, phonemic script, if you like. So I think the IP is commonly accepted, but there are some changes or differences that you see, particularly in the I, or the capital, and the small I. I think in some areas they might use this as the sound, in some places the short E. So it depends where you might be teaching. So it is, I think if you're in the same context and you're working with the same group, then I think it's quite safe. But if you're working across multiple contexts, then it's important to standardize that and to make sure everyone is clear on what the symbols are.
Zainab, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't use all of the symbols for every word and to, like, write it in the phoneme, in phonetics. I would probably use just certain sounds that I know students have problems with, that can be confusing as well. So for example, in the Arab world, what sounds do they have problems with? And I would make sure they knew the phonemic symbol for that sound, and I would put it on top of the word or on top of the letters, and so that they understand. But I think if you were to write the whole phonemic, it's like a different language. I mean, it's enough that they're learning English. You're teaching them two different languages at the same time, and it can be very confusing.
I mean, I loved learning the phonetic alphabet when I learned it in my teacher training, and I felt like I had a secret code that only me and other teachers knew. But then I started thinking, well, now the students have to learn a whole nother what it all means. But I think I love that tip, Zainab, of just writing the symbols for the sounds that are difficult or get confused around that.
I think another area it's really useful for is kind of encouraging connected speech, where you're looking at sentences and not just pronouncing the words by themselves. So the use of the schwa, for example, the upside down E, as it's obviously is sometimes referred to, is really important. And again, going back to accents, this is something we use quite a lot in the Scottish accent, as well as the glottal stop. It's another thing that you don't often hear in some accents, and it may be helpful if students are exposed to certain accents more than others to highlight these. This is perhaps going a bit beyond the IPA, but those symbols can be helpful, like Scotland instead of Scotland.
The guttural, what's it called?
The glottal stop. So it's something that it can be helpful sometimes to identify certain parts of speech that students may not be able to hear because they're not used to. But I think something like that might be a little bit less common. But certainly for connected speech, it's really useful, I find, because the students can read it and pronounce it without having to look at the words, which can sometimes distract them from how they might say it in a more natural way, and then start to get used to how to say that in a more natural way with the reductions in the stress.
And going back the other way, when I first started learning Catalan, where I am, I would listen to people speaking and go, is that one word, 10 words, 5 words? Is it a sentence? Like, I couldn't hear, like, to me, it was just one massive long word, right? Until someone took a breath. And then I'm like, okay, that must be the end of that part. So looking at it from the other way, having all of that connected speech to also see where words end and begin so that you can hear separate it out a little bit as well.
Absolutely. I mean, like assimilation, elision, all these things that come into pronunciation later and more advanced pronunciation are really helpful to highlight, because often it's not obvious just from reading. It has to come through speaking and listening.
Yeah. We've got a comment here connected to that from Naima on Instagram, who says, I use phonetic symbols with a specific sounds like th in this and three. It can help to identify the difference between the two sounds. So like you were saying, Zainab, that difference. And just a quick hello from Nadia. Hi.
Hi, Nadia.
Sorry, Fraser, we were about to talk about teacher educators and what is they need support with or looking for support with.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the big topics in teacher education, and something we covered over the last 2 months, was mentoring and working with teachers on a more personal level, because I think sometimes when it comes to teachers, each teacher will have their own style and way of doing things. So actually, to have a mentor, whether it's a peer or a senior teacher, to really guide those teachers, particularly in early or pre-service or early in-service education, really can be very helpful. I think there's a big leap between pre-service education and moving into the classroom for real. And for many teachers, that's where they need a lot of support. But having said that, I think the other thing that really teacher educators need to be supported on is how to adapt within context. I think this can apply across the board, whether it's teacher educators that are going into new contexts or those that are working in existing contexts, which they're very familiar with, but how to adapt to different classrooms, to different teachers, and use methodology when it's appropriate, but sometimes not use it, and therefore not be too ideological when we're coming to applying something. I think everyone has their own beliefs in teaching, and the same in teacher education, but we do have to be flexible to deal with the context. So I think that's an important message for teacher education. And that's really why the global community is so important, because we can hear different voices, different experiences, and different ways of doing things, to see that it's not only one way that it has to be done in.
Excellent points. And I think also very relevant for teachers as well, like what's changed in teaching, or that gap. I mean, I don't know, for you guys, it was a shock for me after my teacher training going into the classroom. Was it the same for you, Zainab?
Well, I was a teacher before I did any formal training, so it was a boost, definitely. I mean, I learned so much from the teacher training when I did the CELTAP. It did change the way I taught a lot, but I did have some experience. But yes, definitely, I think it is a shock, because you come out of a place where there's so much support to a place where you're just on your own, and you don't know if you're doing it right or wrong.
Yeah, we were sharing some research from a researcher about the gap between learning how to teach and then going into the classroom. That it's quite a sort of reality shock for many. Super. So another one, Zainab, we were talking about like phonology and like areas that teachers find difficult. Do you think it's the same or different for students, like for our learners and teachers watching? Any areas your students struggle with in terms of knowing the subject, like grammar or vocabulary or pronunciation or speaking or writing?
It's definitely, I mean, the same. I think it does depend on, there are some skills that are more difficult in general for teachers to teach and for students to understand. But then at the same time, it does kind of depend on the student as well. You get those students who are very fluent, but just don't do well in like exams or with grammar, or they don't have very good vocabulary. And then you get the opposite, where they don't say anything in the classroom, but they're like 100% in grammar. So it really does depend on the student. I think, some prefer, more are outspoken. They prefer to use the language to speak, and some just kind of see it as, rules, and they just need to learn the grammar rules, and they need to memorize vocabulary words. So it does kind of depend on the student. I've seen many different students, and although a lot of them do tend to have a problem with writing, especially, I think that's the main issue. Generally, it depends. Some all have issues with speaking. They just can't put two words together. They're not they're very hesitant. And then you've got some who don't have a very good, they don't have a lot of vocabulary. They don't have many words that they can use. And then you have some who are really good at reading. They read and they understand, they can write. So it does depend, I think, really on the student and what they're good at.
I think I'm the one, a type of the student you were describing earlier. Like, I can say quite a lot, but it's pretty inaccurate, and and I can't write at all, because I use Google Translate. or a tool. And it made me think, you know, another conversation that we might have over this knowing the subject theme is, do we need to teach handwriting? Like, you know, are our learners going to write much in their lives?
In the future, you mean now with
In
AI?
the future, yeah. Yeah.
I think we
Well,
have to be. Oh, sorry, I apologize.
yeah, go ahead, Fraser.
No, I was just going to say, I think we have to be very careful about what we take away from the education system, because it's very hard to bring it back. And I think handwriting will always be important, as will other skills that we meet that technology could replace. I think we just have to be very careful with that. I mean, technology is only as good as the electricity or the batteries that run it. We still have to function out with technology as well. Yeah. So that was my thought to the question. So.
We've got
that's a good point. Sorry, that's a really good point, because it's I mean in the region I'm in, a lot of countries suffer from power cuts. I mean, at the moment I have one at home. So, and it's like you said, you know, it relies on electricity, it relies on internet, which isn't always available. So yeah, they will have to rely on themselves to write. They will have to learn how to you know, write properly. So we do need to focus on handwriting as well.
We've got a lot of comments all coming in about some of the points we were making earlier. Here's one from Nadia, who says, just go up a little bit. I think the environment that learners sometimes are taught in plays a role. In our context, we don't focus on speaking because it's time consuming, and our classes are 40 minutes long with 40 learners. So yes, that's you know, that's hard. That's a really good point, Nadia. And this one is, classroom practice, especially putting young learners in real life situations, is very challenging. Teaching grammar implicitly is difficult as well. I think that's grammar and context is something that we'll be talking about a lot over the next 3 months. So we'll be sharing lots of ideas on that. And we've got a question from Instagram from Ravina. Do you think communicative tasks is really helping them come forward? What do you think? Do communicative tasks help learners?
I believe they do.
Zainab?
Yes. Yes, I believe they do. I think I mean, the reason they're learning the language is so that they can communicate. And the more communication they do in the classroom, the more practice they do in the classroom, especially if it's related to the real world, is an advantage. It's helpful. And I think if you're going to choose whether you want to focus more on teaching grammar or communicating, I would choose communicating, because what are they going to do with the grammar? You know, it's okay if they make some mistakes when they're speaking, as long as they're understood. They don't have to have perfect grammar. So yes, definitely communicative tasks, I think, is very important. The more time you can spend on having students communicate in the classroom, the better.
Excellent. And thanks, Marcus. He's put that up on the screen for us. Fraser?
I'd largely agree with some caveats, perhaps. I think we have to look at the level of the students. I think purely communicative tasks, they can have some use, but I think some structure is necessary in the classroom. I think previously the comment mentioned implicitly teaching grammar. That's difficult because of the exposure and the time students have to actually use in practice. I think that's something that naturally happens, if you like, in families where children grow up with constant exposure to a language. But within the classroom and the limited time that teachers have, there has to be some structure and focus. Now, that might be putting the structure prior to the communicative task and kind of moving up to it, maybe like a PPP structure of building the language into more communication, or it could be more task-based with the communicative task at the beginning. So this will depend very much on how the students react to that, how they can benefit from it. But one of the other advantages with communicative tasks is we can develop other skills that are perhaps not specifically language skills. And to Zainab's point about real life situations, I think that's also really important, because ultimately when students leave the classroom, and if English is going to be a big part of their future career or life, they're going to have to use it in those situations. So getting at least some experience of that will also benefit them, in addition to those core or 21st century skills that teachers can integrate into the activity. So it does give the teacher a lot of options, and it does give the students a lot of exposure to different skills and language.
Brilliant. Yes. So I think this is going to be a great topic of conversation over the next 3 months. Just a few comments. Here's one. Well said, Sir Fraser. Handwriting is one thing that AI cannot be replaced. Thanks, Sonia, for that. Yes. And elevating Fraser's status. And there's another, there was one here. Ah, yes, from Nadia. I think it's important to write. Writing activates different parts of the memory, the brain, and makes it easier to recall information sometimes. There's research on handwriting, like how writing something by hand increases the memory of it, I think is.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, well, definitely.
I'm a case in point here as well. Karen, you mentioned your own learning. I speak Mandarin relatively fluently, but my writing is not good because I started learning at the advent of the mobile phone, and that perhaps shows my age. But some years ago, when I started learning Chinese, mobile phones came into use where you could type pinyin. If you know what that is, it's the alphanumeric equivalent of the character, and then you can select the character that you want rather than having to write it. So my writing has suffered for that, and it's a big problem when it comes to filling in forms, etc., because I don't have that option. So I really think it is something to consider when looking at technology. It's not always the solution for every problem. In fact, sometimes it is a solution looking for a problem, and we have to be very wary of that, I think.
Oh, a solution looking for a problem. That's great.
I think I'm stealing that from someone else, that quote, but I can't say who.
Well, my goodness, the time has flown by. To finish off, Zainab and Fraser, what are you most looking forward to about knowing the subject over the next 3 months?
I think what the teachers would really enjoy about this theme is the amount of practical tips and practical activities that they can actually bring into the classroom. I mean, with my experience with teaching teachers, is they're always looking for that practical activity they can actually use in the classroom. And this is what that theme is about. You've got all these courses where they're providing you with different activities that you can try in your classroom that actually work, that can be very communicative. And I think it will be very, resourceful for teachers. They'll enjoy it. They'll get the chance to actually try it with their students as well. So hopefully, a lot of them will get some new ideas over the next 3 months.
I'm guaranteed to happen, and also teachers sharing their ideas on our communities. Fraser?
I think it's quite similar actually with teacher education. I think that the practical nature of it also works through teacher educators and supporting teachers, perhaps giving ideas, but also digging a little bit deeper into why we're doing things. An example of this is, for example, giving activities for games. So considering what does this game do? Does it test the students? Does it practice? Does it test? Does it teach them anything? So kind of going a little bit beyond that and being able to reflect on this. And I think some of the research that comes out in these areas is also really interesting for teacher educators in second language acquisition. It's always a point for debate, and I think people always have their own opinions on this, which really makes it quite vivid and vibrant. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions on that, and of course the webinar on AI that I mentioned before that looks really interesting. So,
well, thank you both so much. I'm really looking forward to my inner teacher nerd coming out to talk about having those discussions on, should we do this? Should we not do this? Is this part important? Is it not? Learning the methodologies, revisiting some of the methodologies I learned about a long time ago, or new methodologies if there are any. So I think it's a broad subject that we're all very much looking forward to for our community discussions, sharing of ideas, like you mentioned, Zainab, and all the resources that we have amongst us all. So it's now time to say bye-bye, everybody. We will see you at the next series of webinars in a couple of weeks. You can find all the information in our LinkedIn, on our website, and links in the copies of many of our social media posts. So thank you so much, Zainab and Fraser, for joining us, and we will see you all soon.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.